I want to bring into our conversation Rachel Van Landingham. She's a former JAG and professor of law and associate dean of research at Southwestern Law School, Los Angeles. Rachel, thanks for joining us. I wonder, one of the big things that I have to think about as we see Maduro appearing in court today is how he got there. And I wonder if you think the circumstances of his capture could come up today as something that the court ends up caring about.
Thanks for having me, Allie. Well, I think it could come up, but I don't think it's something that the court will care much about because there's a long line of cases, including a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, that basically state that the methods of bringing a person before U.S. federal court are irrelevant to the actual ongoing prosecution. In fact, there was a case that was before our Supreme Court in which the DEA forcibly abducted, kidnapped a Mexican national and brought him to the United States for federal prosecution. And the Supreme Court said, well, we're not going to look at that regarding the legality of the actual prosecution.
I think the other question here is whether Maduro has immunity at all as a head of state. Rachel.
And I think that's the tougher question. I think that's something the courts, the court here as well as appellate courts will wrestle with. We had a similar case, even though with stark differences, with General Noriega, and the foreign head of state immunity really didn't cover him because he was only at best a de facto ruler of Panama back in 1989 because he had engaged in a military coup. Here we had Mr. Maduro, who was a recognized president, recognized by the United States president since he served as interim president 2013, at least up until 2019, when the United States stopped recognizing him because of election irregularities and his misconduct there. So I think that's going to raise a much stronger issue that the courts will wrestle with here.
Rachel Van Landingham, thank you for coming on with us. Paul, I want to come back to you. I think the other piece here is how do you even go about selecting a jury of someone's peers when the defendant is a literal leader of a foreign country?
So you first don't want jurors who say they've never heard anything about the case because that would mean that they weren't living in the real world. So you want people who can set aside everything that they think they know and their politics and just render a verdict based on the evidence that's presented in court. And this Southern District of New York is home to many super high-profile cases, most recently the one including Sean Diddy Combs as the defendant. And so it's a jurisdiction that's used to having jurors know about stuff that they see on TV, but still, according to the appellate courts, folks get fair trials in those cases, even though the jurors may know something about the case before they're impaneled to do justice in a particular trial.
And we were just given another update from within the courtroom. Paul, I wonder your reaction to this. The Associated Press is saying that Maduro in the room to the judge said, I was captured. Does that delineation, does the fact that he's saying captured, which implies force, which of course we know was used to get him out of Caracas over the weekend, does that have any bearing on what ultimately happens here?
It has political bearing, but it probably does not have legal bearings. Courts in the U.S. are concerned about whether their specific court has jurisdiction to hear a case. And the law is clear that if someone commits crimes outside of the United States that impact the homeland, then that person can be tried in federal court. The courts are much less concerned with how the person lands in their jurisdiction, even if it's through illegal means. They're more focused on, again, whether that court has the legal jurisdiction to hear the case.
So I want to give viewers a little bit more insight into what's going on in the courtroom. And again, we're getting these updates in real time. At one point to start the hearing, the judge says, it's my job to assure this is a fair trial. That's my job. That's what I intend. The Associated Press also reports that Maduro told the judge, as I just mentioned, I was captured. That's a quote as he made his first appearance. Mimi Rocha, I want to bring you in, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. No better experience than that for for what we are watching here today. I wonder, as someone who's worked in this office, you've prosecuted these kinds of cases, walk us through the preparation that goes into a case like this and your reaction to, in the same way Paul was talking about, if Maduro saying I was captured, how that factors into what the prosecution will ultimately do here, if it's a factor at all.
I'll answer that last part, excuse me, first, Ali, because it's quick, which is I ultimately don't think it will have an impact on the prosecution. As Paul referred to, there is a doctrine, case law, pretty well established that it does not matter how the defendant arrived in the United States. There have been cases in the past where DEA literally went in and got somebody off the streets of another country, brought them here, and the prosecution was allowed to proceed. So I'm not, there will be litigation practice, but I do not think that ultimately it will have an impact. In terms of what's going on in the U.S. Attorney's Office right now, I mean, this is a great opportunity for me to brag about my old office, because the truth is, the Southern District of New York has had extremely high-profile cases over the decades. It has tried terrorists involved in the embassy bombing cases. It has tried, leaders of mafia organizations back in their heyday. It has tried foreign leaders in other circumstances, not this one. It has tried celebrities. So the office, it's really a sort of badge of honor that the office knows how to handle that. We do have a U.S. attorney in charge of the office now, Jay Clayton, who has never been a prosecutor before. I don't know if that will have an impact. I did notice that the indictment, the superseding indictment, is written in a very different way than usual indictments, including the one in 2020 that Bill Barr signed off on under the first Trump administration, which was much more of your classic indictment language. This one reads a little bit more like a press release. It has more conclusions in it. It's more inflammatory, quite frankly. I do think that any defense attorneys who represent these defendants will argue to a judge that there's a risk of not being able to get a fair trial here because of not just the language in the indictment, but again, that will be litigated, but also the comments that President Trump is making that assume this defendant's guilt. That is always highly problematic in federal court. I think Judge Hellerstein will, as any judge would, really try to limit those, but I don't know if that's going to be possible with Donald Trump. They've already posted photographs of these defendants in custody. That is something defense attorneys are going to raise. So the prosecutors here are going to take this as seriously, which is very seriously, as any case ever has been in the office. I'm sure they are prepared for it and ready to go, and frankly excited. This is the kind of case prosecutors really like to do. It's an important case. It's a good case. It's a worthy case, however he got here and whatever your political beliefs. But there will be challenges for them, many of which are being brought on by President Trump as he continues to speak and post things. So we'll have to see how that litigation plays out.
And notably, it's not the first time that I have reported on or any of us have talked about a legal case where Trump's comments, as off the cuff as they frequently are, might be then brought into a court of law and change or make harder the ultimate goal of his administration or allies. We've seen this time and again, whether we were talking about James Comey or Letitia James or the prosecutions made against them. Of course, this against Nicolas Maduro is much different. But even as we are waiting for more information from the court, we know Maduro has spoken in his own defense, saying he's pleading not guilty alongside of his wife, telling the judge, in his words, "I'm a decent man, the president of my country." And Mark, Mimi brings up a great point that this is not the first time that DOJ has filed charges against against Nicolas Maduro. So, Mimi, if you can just detail the background there of, you mentioned Bill Barr in 2020 and the implications of now being able to act on these indictments after so much work legally has gone into trying to bring Maduro to justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think this highlights, to your original question, how long this office, the FBI, the DEA, all of the agencies involved have been preparing for this. This isn't something that just came together in the past couple of days. In 2020, I forget when exactly, but an indictment was unsealed by the Department of Justice, which was under the end of the first Trump administration, and it was Bill Barr was the Attorney General. And it was very similar charges. I mean, what you have now in the suit, so it was unsealed at the time, even though I don't think there was any realistic possibility or thought about getting Maduro at the time. But there are a lot of reasons to unseal and to have charges against someone, even if you're not imminently able to arrest them. It limits their travel. There's red notices put on them if they do try to travel, if they go to a country that we have a treaty with, et cetera. And there were other co-defendants. And one thing that's really important to note is that two of those co-defendants that were named in the 2020 indictment have pled guilty. One of them just recently in June of this year, which probably is not a coincidence. He hasn't been sentenced yet. If I were a betting person, I would bet that he either is or will be cooperating. And that may even have something to do with the timing. So from a prosecutorial point of view, and I am putting all politics and foreign policy issues aside, because that's not the lane I'm here to talk about. From a prosecutorial and investigative point of view, this has been going on for years, and it is likely a strong case and likely going to get stronger with the cooperators.